it's interesting for me because I can say that I was someone who would spend every night and most of the day in bed, suffering with anxiety, too scared to go outside, too scared to experience life. I went from that person to now being a coach. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you are. I hope it's good. Welcome to episode 1 of the Clear Mind Academy podcast. What is a life coach? I am your host, Jay Welsh, and I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to listen to what we have to say. Hopefully today we will help you to understand the difference between the different types of talking therapies. And if you are someone who is looking to take on some therapy or coaching for yourself, then I do hope that this will help you to find the right one. So without any further ado, let's get started. Okay, so the very basic is that life coaching is a type of talking therapy, much like counseling or having psychology, psychotherapy. You might want a spiritual guide or an NLP practitioner. There are tons of different types, and we're going to try and get into a few of them today. Now, it's good to say right at the beginning that I am a life coach and NLP practitioner, so I know a little bit more about them than I do about the others. Hopefully, as the series goes on, maybe we'll be looking at getting in people from those different types of therapies that can be able to kind of really shine a light on their style of talking therapy and what they like to get out of it. Now, for me, the way that I differentiate life coaching from counseling, say, is that life coaching is about your goals and achievements. So it's about what is it that you want to work towards, and now let's get it done. Let's talk about the steps that we need to implement into our life in order to get there. Now, with counseling, it's a lot more to do with your mental health and your kind of emotional balance. So it's to do with how are you feeling about this, and maybe we can work that out from a different way. Now, of course, it's not exclusive. You know, every single type of therapy, I guess, will naturally take elements from other types of therapy. So, for example, if you know my coaching, although it is goal driven, you know, and we're going to be working towards those goals, I might actually find that some of those limitations or limiting beliefs that we talk about in coaching are things that are to do with your mental health, and therefore I might decide to kind of put those sorts of methods or strategies into the program to help us to really work with that and be able to get through it, because it might be that that's the thing that's blocking you. Now, in counseling, of course, it's goal driven as well, because, you know, at the end of the day, you might want to become more happy, you might want to become more successful, you know, more experience love or life in a different way. So counseling can really help with that, but of course you have a goal. It might just be simply just to stop struggling so much. So like I said, they can really sort of mix well together, but it's all about the primary focus. You know, life coaching usually works on a kind of time scale, so it's like, right, what do we want and when do we want it by? You know, it's I suppose that's why it kind of spoke to me a little bit more, you know, and this is nothing against the other therapies whatsoever, but I found that for myself, I like working towards deadlines. You know, I like to have a clear picture in my mind of where I'm going and what I'm doing with the time between now and then. And I think that's why life coaching for me was kind of the ideal choice. I knew that I wanted to get into this somehow. You know, if any of you have seen my website or any of my socials, you'll probably see that I say I aim to be the person that I needed. And life coaching for me made a massive difference, because for me it wasn't. Well, for me it was more, what is it that you want to achieve? You know, for me it was, I want to stop being so anxious. You know, so we kind of turned that on its head, and it was a lot more like, what does that look like? You know, what does a life without anxiety look like for you? And it changed my thought process, because for me, I spent a lot of time, and I don't know if anyone out there can relate to this, but I spent a lot of the time thinking about the problem and not thinking about the solutions, right? Life coaching changed that for me, because it changed my focus. You know, what was I focusing on? Let's say, for example, and I use this analogy quite a lot with my clients. Now, for those of you who are children or remember what it's like to be a child, this analogy you've probably experienced. Yeah, so let's imagine one of your parents comes into your bedroom and says you need to clean it, right? Your bedroom's a mess. When they walk into that room, the focus that they're looking at is the dirt. Yeah, it's the things that aren't clean about that bedroom. So it might be that you might have left a couple of cups somewhere, or empty glasses, empty bottles, bits of rubbish, washing all over the floor. That's what they're focusing on. Now, let's say, for example, that naturally you're not a very good cleaner. Yeah, so you decide to spend a bit of time cleaning out that room. Okay, you don't focus on the empty glasses and bowls that have stacked up on the shelves. You concentrate on your washing. Then your parents come in and they say, look at all those empty bowls. I asked you to clean your room. This place is a mess. Now, do you see the difference of focus there, right? Now, of course, the intention is different. Yeah? For the child, or for when we were children, the focus probably was, let's make sure that this room is cleaner than it was before so that I don't get in trouble. Parents, let's make sure that this room is clean. So with a child looking around the room thinking, I've done a pretty good job here. I don't have any clothes that are lying on the floor. It's all in the wash and I feel good about that. Parent, you haven't done anything about this. Yeah? So this isn't anything against you parents out there. And, definitely do focus on those bowls because, especially during these hot summer months, you don't want to be leaving any food out. But the point is it's the same thing. We're looking at the same room, but we're focusing on different things. Now, for me, life coaching, that's what it was. It was the same thing. It was concentrating on my anxiety or concentrating on the struggles that I had with it, but just looking at it differently, right? Looking at my life, and rather than looking at the things that really made me feel rubbish and kind of, held me back a lot in life, it was concentrating and visualizing a future where I didn't have those things, where they didn't exist. What would my life look like if I didn't have any of these limitations that I believed I had? And personally for me, I found being in that space where I was concentrating on the cleanliness rather than the dirt, it eliminated a lot of the stress. If you go through life only looking for the dirty parts of it, it's a much different experience. I'm from London. Okay, London is an incredible city. It's also incredibly dirty. All right, so if you go to London and you're looking at the dirt, right? Let's say that your expectations are cleanliness. You might come away from London with a very different experience than somebody who was excited by, the hustle and bustle, or the kind of, just the excitement that London can bring. It's same city, same experience, or same city but different experience. Yeah. So purely by being in a place where you're looking for the positives rather than the negatives is a much more enjoyable experience. It's much more enjoyable, and that for me, as a late teen, it gave me the motivation to carry on. It helped me to realise that actually there are parts of this room that are clean, And here's the thing. So for those of you who don't know, so when I was a teenager, I really struggled with anxiety. For me, it felt like it came quite out of the blue. Hindsight and the ability to be able to look back at my childhood makes me think, oh, actually no, there were lots of traits there of somebody who was struggling with anxiety. But it really kind of came to the surface big time when I was about 16. I was quite a high achiever, I'd like to say, or I'd like to think. I was predicted quite good grades at school. I was in a lot of the sports teams. I was in the school musicals. I had a lot of parties to go to. I was very lucky that I had all of that going for me. And do you know what? It's interesting because you hear a lot of people say about, when they were younger, people say, oh, you're never going to achieve this. You're never going to get that. And it kind of unlocks this fight in them. This, I want to prove people wrong. Well, actually, for me, I had the opposite. I had a lot of people who had quite high expectations of me. They thought that I was going to go on to do something special. And I really did feel the pressure. I definitely felt the pressure. And it got too much for me. And all of a sudden, I started to experience panic attacks. Now, at this point, it wasn't that long ago, but we're talking sort of, almost 15 years ago. God, that's weird to say. But yeah, almost 15 years ago. It was a different time. We didn't really understand it like we do now. I didn't know what a life coach was really. And my mum was one, so I don't think anyone really knew. But, excuse me, it was this kind of feeling that something has happened to me, this sort of irreversible change. Like I went from being a lovely bit of bread to a bit of burnt toast, and there wasn't anything I could do to go back. That's how it felt at the time. Now, of course, that wasn't the case. But any of you who have experienced anxiety in a similar fashion to the way that I did might be able to relate to that. It does feel like, oh, I wish I could be who I used to be, but, that ship sailed, I've moved on, and this is who I've become, and this is just who I am. And it was an incredibly scary time. You know, I did isolate myself from friends because I got to a point where I just felt like any experience that they were excited about would be dampened by me being with them. You know, like I'll take a good example: holidays, right? So if my friends are kind of planning a holiday or whatever, there'd be a part of me that would say, I don't want to go. I would want to go, of course I would. Of course I want to kind of experience that with them. But the reason that I didn't want to, and the reason that a lot of the time I didn't go, was because I was absolutely terrified of having a panic attack. So, if they had booked a flight to one of these party islands, I felt that, and they, you know, let's say they were very excited about it. I thought, well, if I go with them, then panic attacks is going to be one of the things that happens on this journey. And if I don't go, they're a lot more likely to enjoy it, because panic attacks are not enjoyable. Yeah? So that was kind of where I was at that point. So it made sense for me to hide myself away from friends. I also felt that the safest place for me was just to stay in bed all evening, which of course is not the best place for any person. It does get very boring looking at the same walls each day. Anybody who went through lockdown knows exactly what I'm talking about. It does. I mean, you get cabin fever. You know, if you just kind of stay in the same room the whole time, and you do need to get out. You do need to socialise. We all know that and understand the importance of that now, which is fantastic. But at the time, I did not. I did not understand what was going on. Now, of course, I saw various different types of, or I sought after various different types of therapies, and they're all fantastic in their own way. They really are, and I think it's just about finding the one that suits you. Now, of course, the other thing to say is that, you know, not every life coach is the same. We're not carbon copies of one another. You know, my approach is very different to other coaches' approaches. Oh, that sounds good. Other coaches' approaches. And there will be times when somebody will, you know, a potential client will come to me and I'll think, I'd love to work with you, but I actually think I know somebody who would resonate with you better. So I'll recommend them, you know, and vice versa. And I think that's important to know. So I know that there are a lot of people who have maybe tried coaching or once and said, no, it's not for me. What I would say is maybe that coach isn't right for you. You know, don't just kind of, you know, give up on it very soon. But the reason that it worked well for me is because, like I said to you earlier, it's about focusing on something completely different. And I didn't realise that was a possibility. You know, when you are kind of stuck in that place of anxiety and feeling really low, you tend to focus on the same kind of thing. You know, the dirt in the room. That's what you focus on. And you do not see any of the cleanliness. You do not see anything that's exciting. You don't see any of it, really. So having someone who was showing me that was, I mean, it really did change my life. You know, and it's interesting for me because I can say that I was someone who would spend every night and most of the day in bed, suffering with anxiety, too scared to go outside, too scared to experience life. I went from that person to now being a coach, and you know, I mean, I got out of bed in between that, by the way. You know, I'm not just coaching from my bed. You know, I got out and I've experienced lots of things. Oh, here's the thing, something to feel proud of. Like I said, I was terrified of flying about panic attacks. I've been to Australia. I'm from London. You know, so concentrating on those sorts of things makes you feel good because you're like, wow, look at what I've achieved. And that is, I have to say, as a result of the coaching that I had at the time. You know, it really did change my life. And that's what made me want to be able to change life for others. I aim to be the person I needed. You know, I want anybody who is in a very similar situation to me to be able to see things a little bit differently. You know, and I'd love to be the person to help them see that. So the other thing I mentioned is that I'm an NLP practitioner. Now, NLP is obviously abbreviated. It's neuro-linguistic programming, which, I mean, sounds pretty fancy, right? But what it is it's all about your brain's language. You know, the way that our brain kind of communicates and what it sees. And what we do in NLP is we try to interrupt that process. We change it. You know, what we do know is that there is the way that it works, and it's always in this order, is that you have a thought first, then a feeling, and then an action. Always in that order. So with NLP, it helps to change that pattern. So no matter what thought you have, it doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to result in the same action or the same feeling. You know, you can think about things and and not have the same feeling or the same action. Classic example. I'll tell you now. I did say I went to Australia. Now, what I didn't say was that I was absolutely terrified doing it, but I was, and I went with a friend of mine. This was yeah. So obviously, for those of you who don't know, the plane journey, I mean, in total is almost 24 hours. It's a long time to get there, just as long to get back, believe it or not. But I went with a friend of mine who wasn't nervous at all. He was excited. We turned up at the restaurant. No, we didn't fly from there. We flew from the airport actually, which I do recommend. Don't look at restaurants for flying. We flew from the airport, and when I turned up and I saw him, I mean, it was clear to if someone came in. I mean, let's say that someone said, "I'll give you £100 if you can guess who the anxious one is here." It would have been the easiest £100 they made in their life. You know, the difference between the way that I was standing, the look on my face, the pure colour of my face, and compared to him, yeah, completely different. And I was prepared in terms of my, you know, my things to help me calm down and all of this stuff, right? And at no point was he anxious. And I remember saying to him at one point, because here's what happened. Actually, you know what, I'll get to this bit in a minute. Actually, this for those with anxiety, hopefully they'll take a little bit from this. So I remember saying to my friend when we eventually did get to Australia, I said, "How were you not anxious?" And he said, "Why would I be anxious? I'm going on a lad's holiday to Australia." And I said, "But do you not think about what would happen if you were to experience a panic attack on the plane?" And do you know what he said? He said, "Why would I think about that? That's going to make me feel awful. Why would I think about that?" And how true is that? Why would you think about that? You know, and that's what happens with anxiety, is we focus on these things that would make anybody feel awful. You know, there's nothing special about me that makes me think, oh, you know, that means that I'm a lot more likely to have a panic attack than somebody else. There's nothing physically like that about me. But I was focusing on it a lot more. So I guess, therefore, I was more likely to have one, purely because that's what my focus was on. You know, if you go to London and look to focus on the dirt, you're a lot more likely to find it than somebody who's looking to see the lights. Yeah? And that's an incredible thing to realize, is that the thought was about the journey. It was about the plane journey, right? The feeling that I had, because the thought was slightly different, the feeling that I had was just, you know, a horrible anxiety. And the action was not eating for a few days, you know, desperately trying to get to sleep so that I could kind of fast forward the journey, whereas my friend was excited about it. He's still thinking about the same journey. We're on the same plane. Oh no, I was there. You know, we're sitting next to each other. And the difference between those seats, I don't recommend the airline. I'm not going to tell you what it was, but the difference between those seats, there wasn't much difference. You know, so the journey itself wasn't much different at all for either of us. But the experience of the journey, that's what was different. Yeah. So NLP helps us to really change that pattern, to interrupt it, and get us to stop focusing on the rubbish stuff. You know, again, I was focusing on the problems so much. That's all I was thinking about. I didn't think about the fun that we would get up to. I didn't think about the Great Barrier Reef, you know, or being able to see, what are those things called, that they sell at the 7-Eleven. They're like I can't remember, but they're really nice. Basically, they're these drinks, these frozen drinks. I didn't think about being able to see a crocodile, or kangaroos, or koala bears, or just being around Australian people who, you know, if you have never met an Australian people, most of them are brilliant people, absolutely hilarious. You know, I didn't think about any of that thing. All I was thinking about, and I was obsessing over, was having a panic attack on a plane that lasts for 12 hours. Now that's the difference. That is a huge difference. Because of course I'm going to feel rubbish if that's what I'm concentrating on. So NLP is brilliant because yeah, it really does. It interrupts it, and the techniques are fantastic. And I use that in my programs a lot of the time with a lot of clients, and you know, and I love to see the shift in people. I think it's brilliant. So I mean, if there is anyone who is listening to this and thinking, oh, well, that makes a little bit of sense. Although, stop there and wait until I explain this. And then maybe this will make a difference as well. Imagine that you're in a position right now, right? Let's say I'm going to use flying as the example. Yeah, getting on a plane. Let's say that is something that makes you feel particularly anxious. Let's say that you had a flight in 3 days that you were feeling particularly anxious about, right? And you know, you're sitting there or lying there, and you're thinking about this flight and thinking, oh man, you know, I have to do it. I've paid the tickets, you know, this, that, and the other. And you're starting to think about these specific things that could go wrong, right? Imagine now that all of a sudden you don't have that flight. You're not going to be feeling anxious, right? And I know this to be true for myself because there have been times in the past where I've had something scheduled that I've been feeling, you know, pretty anxious about, and then all of a sudden it's not happening anymore. It gets cancelled. You know, I think we've all kind of experienced at least one thing being cancelled over the last few years as a result of COVID, probably. But then it gets cancelled, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I feel all right now. Yeah? So it's almost as if, let's imagine that all of a sudden you were just on a plane. Yeah? You woke up one morning, you're on a plane. I mean, of course, that would be quite. Maybe that's not the best example. That would actually be terrifying for a lot of people. But what I'm saying is, let's eliminate the build-up. Let's imagine that the build-up isn't there. All the time that you spend thinking about it before, imagine that's not there. It's going to be a lot less time feeling anxious, right? So it's to do with the build-up. So much of it is to do with the build-up. What are you planning for? Are you planning for a disaster? Are you planning for something that you feel is out of your control? If so, why are you planning? It's out of your control. I thought panic attacks were out of my control. I thought there was something that was happening to me rather than something I was doing to myself. And that's why I spent so much time thinking about it. I was desperate, thinking, oh gosh, if this happens, what will I do? Where will I run? Can't get off the plane, can't take a 5-minute break and then come back on. Yeah, parachutes are not that fast. I can't catch up with the plane. Yeah, you can't. That's the other thing. If you're looking for the escape route, right? You're looking for your exit and trying to work out when you can escape that situation. That's why I suppose getting on a plane was quite a big one for me, because it was, you can't get off. Once you're on, you're on. Once they shut the doors. So what I want you to do, if you take anything from this podcast, I'm going to wrap it up now. I think 20 minutes is about a good time. This is the first one we're doing, so we're just kind of testing the waters. Let me know if you want more. Let me know if you want less. Let me know if you want someone else. Go on, try and hurt my feelings. No, I'm joking. And I do understand, by the way, that, with this podcast, we haven't necessarily delved into the other types of therapies as much as maybe you would like. But hopefully over the coming episodes, and if that is something that you want, let me know, and we'll try and get either a psychologist, psychotherapist, or counsellor on these podcasts so that we can really ask themselves these questions and send them in as well. Catch us on our socials, on Instagram or Facebook, or via our website, which will be out. I mean, right now, time of recording, it's middle of July, so hopefully by the end of August we'll have something, some sort of website. But until then, Facebook and Instagram, and let us know what it is that you want from out of this, and we'll try and do that. But if there's anything that I want you to gain from this episode, because I hope that each podcast that you hear, you learn something a little bit different that makes a slight little change. What I want you to try and do is eliminate the build-up and only plan for the things that you feel like you can plan for. So let's say, for example, it is that you're going on holiday and you're feeling anxious about it. Plan for the things you're excited about. Yeah? Spend time putting in that swimming costume and get excited about the pool. Yeah? Spend a very little amount of time thinking about the things that you don't want to do, and spend a lot more time thinking about the things that you do. Concentrate on the cleanliness of the bedroom, not the dust. What a lovely way to round it up. Anybody who has listened this far, I want to thank you so much. Thank you for taking your time to listen to me. I hope that you have gained something from this podcast, and if you have, please let me know. It would be lovely to hear back from you and to see, like I said, what you want from future podcasts, or just anything that you gained, anything you want to kind of challenge or ask more questions about, or something that I've said today. I'd love to hear it. I absolutely would. So please do get in contact. Until then, I'll see you when I see you.